Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Larry Pratt, CEO of Gun Owners of America. Hello, Larry. How are you?
Hey, good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you back. Gee, let's see. Since the last time you were on my show, I think we've started another war. What do you think? Is that good for our gun owners, or what?
Well, there's a war on our border, and you probably know it better than anybody else because you're living down almost at ground zero. It's incredible. And to have the head of the Department of Homeland Security say, "Never been more secure." That's Inspector Magoo speaking.
Janet Napolitano. I thought things couldn't get any worse from the one prior to her, dual citizen.
Yeah, it's just an amazing, willful ignoring of what's happening there. They want those illegals in this country no matter what, and it doesn't matter that we're now beginning to see a fairly significant spillover of what the drug cartels are doing in Mexico. I think if it weren't for the fact that we're an armed people, and that by the grace of God, the ranchers that live at or near the border can go about, and I mean go about, like go to the bathroom, go to the living room, wherever they go, packing, they'd be overrun and either dead or forced to flee. And you see the most dramatic difference when, excuse me, when you see the enormous violence in Ciudad Juarez, probably from what I've read, the greatest amount of armed violence in the world. A city that's just absolutely drowning in armed violence. And yet right across the river, El Paso is a city that has been deemed, for the city of its size, the most peaceful in the country. Now, that says something about the cartels must know that the American people are armed, and certainly Texans are known to be armed, and they also are able to carry them about, not just in their house, but when they go to the store, when they go to church. It's probably a good idea not to mess with Texas.
Well, let's see. Doesn't Mexico have the most stringent gun laws out there, much more stringent than the United States?
Well, they don't have an outright ban, but it's almost the same. They have a very strict licensing system. And if you finally manage to get a license, it's only good for a small caliber handgun or a single double shot rifle or shotgun. And you then can go to the store and pick up your gun. And I'm serious about saying you can go to the store. There's one in the country. It's in Mexico City. So, a lot of Mexicans probably have to drive 2 days from one extreme of the country to Mexico City to pick up the gun, which is probably going to involve a day. I'm sure they don't make that easy anyway. And then 2 days back. How cool is that? So, yeah, they've got very, very strict gun control, and it simply doesn't faze the criminals one bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of decent Mexicans own guns because who's going to protect them? The cops are not even always on their side. The military's not always on their side. So they're just collateral damage. It almost looks like a three-way civil war: the government against the cartels against each other, because the cartels are plural. So you've got people that just are decent people in Mexico, and I think that's most of the people of Mexico. They're forced to be victims unless they can somehow manage to protect themselves. And of course, if they ever get caught with a gun, that's serious trouble and time in jail if they don't have a license for it. So they're really in a desperate pickle, and I think it's a very grievous thing that the elite shows time and again. They don't really care about the little people, the subjects.
They don't. They're doing the same thing to us with the Mexicans that they did to the white Russians, the white Christian Russians, when they inflamed and drove the Jews out of the Pale settlement over in Russia.
Well, there's always been a desire on the part of rogue government, which is most of the history of man, to divide people and to make one group of people a target for the government. The Jews in Germany, the kulak farmers in Russia, the educated in Cambodia, the Christians in Uganda. Always a targeted population that the government directs a hate campaign against. And in all of those particular cases, the people were also disarmed before the hate campaign really ramped up. They kind of went together. Some incident would be seized upon, used as an excuse, then, we need more gun control. And once they were sure that the stormtroopers wouldn't be shot back at, they went and took care of business. One of our members at Gun Owners of America is Jewish. He's the son of a Holocaust survivors, both his parents. His mother somehow survived the death camps, but his father was a young, well, he was in his mid-teens, I think, and he was in his house, and he saw his brother and sister outside through the window being murdered by the Nazis. So he got a rifle that they had illegally squirreled away in the house, killed the Nazis, and ran away. And he never found out what happened to his parents, but you can't assume it was anything too good. But it was that rifle, that illegal gun, that unregistered gun, that saved his life. And so it's a story that just goes on and on and on. And when government says they want to know where our guns are, that's a very worrisome sign.
And what about our guns here? The news is out that Hillary Clinton signed a UN arms deal. Now the UN's never been particularly high in my list of good organizations.
Right. Well, she hasn't signed an agreement yet, but she did say that she was willing to sit down and work on an arms control treaty, and that doesn't bode well because first of all, I don't think the treaty would be signed, would be approved by our Senate, except there's one worrisome provision in our Constitution that says that treaties are the supreme law of the land when enacted pursuant to the authority of the United States, and they must be voted by a 2/3 vote of the Senate, present and voting. Now there's the real problem. The supremacy, I think, is not a problem because it's only supreme if the treaty was conceived under the authority of the United States. So if obviously you have a Second Amendment staring you in the face, then you can't have a treaty that says there's no more Second Amendment. But the 2/3 present and voting would give a malicious majority leader, and I think Harry Reid might qualify for that, the opportunity to wait until everybody else is gone on a holiday and have 2 or 3 of his buds there, and there you go. By unanimous consent, the treaty would become ratified. Wouldn't make it lawful, but it would be ratified. I'm more concerned, though, about what I've seen them doing in other areas. They'll get some treaty, they'll get some of the thugocracies that populate the UN to sign on to it, and when they get up to around typically 60, 70 different regimes signing on to it, then they begin to declare and talk among themselves as if that's international law. That has become a norm, and this norming process has been used already against us. And there's a very well-known example that, or a very important example, maybe it's not well enough known. My friend Tom DeWeese of the American Policy Center has pointed to for some time. There was a New Age gold mine. People had bought it. It had been defunct for a while. The price of gold was going up under the Clinton regime, and they thought, well, it'll be economical to mine this thing again. So they had spent a lot of money getting it ready to open. Not only physical changes that had to be made, but a lot of fees and lawyer expenses in order to get everything in compliance. And they were getting ready to open this mine. It was a few miles outside of Yellowstone National Park when the Clinton bureaucrats thought, oh, this is just going to be such an assault on Mother Earth. And so they went up to the UN, explained their plight, and creeps from the UN actually went out to Yellowstone to make an assessment so that they could then declare that this was a World Heritage Site. Well, we never signed on to the Biodiversity Treaty. It didn't matter. It had been normed as international law. Now, that would be, I think, a really troublesome development for the gun area if, even if we don't sign on to Hillary Clinton's treaty, but enough governments sign on to it that it becomes the norm, then when you get somebody like Obama, who doesn't mind ruling by decree, he'll just turn to that and say, well, we've got to register the guns, or we've got to do this, or we've got to do that, because that would put us in compliance with international law. They won't say compliance with a treaty that was never signed. They'll just say international law. And after all, aren't we all about living by the law?
Somebody in the chat room, I got a little distracted, Larry. They're talking about the drug war. This just to bring that up, the last time you were on my show, you pointed out that the BATF. Now, this is the same organization that killed almost 100 Americans, 17 little children in Waco, were delivering the arms to the Zetas, to Mexico, and the Zetas are working with the drug dealers. Now, it's been my experience in from the information that I've gotten over the last 20 years that our CIA and Israel's Mossad are the drug cartels. They are they are profiting over here. They are running the drugs up, and we trained the Zetas, who now they say, well, we trained them for the government, but they went to the bad side now. Now they're working for the drug dealers. I mean, this whole thing's getting a little confusing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's getting less and less confusing is that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, usually referred to as ATF, at the top, in spite of the objection of agents on the ground, because they're now blowing the whistle, deliberately, from what these agents are telling us, the head of the ATF, the acting director, Ken Melson, and even the assistant attorney general in the Justice Department, which is over the ATF, Lenny Brewer, deliberately conceived of a policy to try to change the paradigm on the Second Amendment debate. They know that at the moment, if a politician says, "Hey, I think gun control is really important. We need more gun control," that politician is probably going to have a lot of trouble getting reelected or elected in the next election. But they needed something that would. It was what Waco was intended to be, a demonstration that we need more ATF agents, we need more money, we need more gun control. And so they deliberately set about a policy of making it so that guns could go into Mexico in an increasing volume that could be traced back to the U.S. The problem, one of the problems that they've had from their point of view, is that hardly any of the guns in Mexico that are being used by the cartels are coming from the United States. As the head of our the general in charge of our Southern Command said, that Central America is awash in weapons, and that's what's coming in primarily to Mexico. That's what the cartels are using. And so the boys at ATF in Washington were determined to try to increase the number of U.S. guns, guns that could be found at crime scenes and then traced back to the United States. And typically in Mexico, especially, the criminals just leave the guns at especially the scene of a murder because they don't want to get caught with a gun. That's real serious time in Mexico, and people aren't supposed to have guns, so they're running around with an AK. That might draw a little attention, and so they just throw it down, and they're going to get another one because with the stuff coming in from Central America, no problem. The supply is working real well for them. And so sometime in 2009, as far as we can tell from what the agents themselves saw, the Operation Gun Runner, which had been initially designed to let guns go in questionable sales or with a confidential informant, and then when he would make a transfer, boom, they would make an arrest. But that wasn't good enough for the boys in Washington. They wanted to really ramp up the sales so that they could get the political benefit from it. And by the way, their claim is that, oh, well, we wanted these guns to go into Mexico so we could trace them up to the cartels and the headquarters and bust the big boys. Well, yeah, except they never told the Mexicans that. And if they had gone into Mexico without proper paperwork, unlike here, you get a year in jail in Mexico if you go in without a visa. So this was something that was clearly not designed as a law enforcement operation. It wasn't designed as a sting to nail the cartel. It was designed exactly what the agents have told us it was designed for, and which they had objected to. They had said, this can't turn out well. If you go to gunowners.org, which is our website, gunowners.org, one of the things on the front page is a little line about the investigative reports of Cheryl Atkinson at CBS Evening News. And if you click on that, it'll go to her page, which has a series of, it's at least a dozen reports now that she's done on this very scandal, talking to the agents who have been blowing the whistle, who have been contacted by Senator Grassley, have been contacted by Representative Darrell Issa, the head of the House Oversight Committee, and she has done an amazing job. Almost all the rest of the so-called mainline media, which I prefer to call the Democrat media, have been ignoring this. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a single ABC, NBC, CNN report on this. Fox has had me on a couple of times. They have a reporter, William LaJeunesse, in Los Angeles, who stuck his toe in the water. But CBS is really the only one that has provided continuous, genuine investigative reporting. And the story is that in spite of the objections of these whistleblowing agents, and some of them have already suffered reprisals, this program went ahead. There was a chap in Mexico City, Darren Gill, an ATF agent in a kind of diplomatic status that he had, interfacing with Mexican law enforcement. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's what he was doing. And when he learned that this was happening, he said, we have treaty obligations with Mexico. We can't be doing anything that's supposed to be law enforcement in Mexico without telling them and working with them. And he was told by Ken Nelson, the acting director, and by Lenny Brewer, the assistant attorney general over the ATF, shut up, don't tell him a thing, and they forced him into early retirement. And other agents reported that they've been threatened with, we're going to, charge you with damaging the federal government or damaging an investigation or something like that. And they actually had a meeting to try to figure out what they could do with this one agent, John Dodson, who was one of the whistleblowers that Cheryl Atkinson interviewed on her programs. They couldn't figure out how they could do it. And that means this guy must be clean as he can be.
Now, Larry, you mentioned the BATF. This is what got me started. Not only what the BATF did at Waco, which we just celebrated the anniversary of, but the way the press covered the Waco, trying somehow, they forced those agents to go in there and kill all those children to save them from a child molester. But also the April 19th is the anniversary of Oklahoma City bombing, and no BATF agent stationed in the federal building were there.
Yeah, and when I was at an event last year on April 19, a rally, the media is so ignorant from their government schooling that they thought that we were there to celebrate in a perverse way, the Oklahoma City bombing and Timothy McVeigh. And I said, did you ever hear of April 19 in 1775? Did you ever, or 76, did you ever hear about that and what happened there in Lexington and Concord when the British shot at our forefathers and we whooped them that day? April 19 is the day that the shot was heard, it was fired, it was heard around the world, and you guys in the media, you never heard that shot? Are you deaf? They are so ignorant, and it's not entirely their fault because that's the way they've been taught. If you go to a government school and you don't have parents that are saying, okay, I know that's what they told you and didn't tell you, but here's the rest of the story, you're going to come out of there thinking that the Bill of Rights is somehow a real nasty thing that was done to this country, and only in our enlightened times are we at a point where we can get beyond that 18th century restraint on really doing wonderful things and having the government help us do everything.
Yeah. Are we making any progress? Larry, I mean, with all the news that I've been reporting over the last 20 years, I've almost started to ask myself, who really won the Cold War? I mean, every plank in the Communist Manifesto is intact in America today. The doesn't seem like anybody's paying attention to our Bill of Rights here. When the Homeland Security came out and started trying to trash the veterans and Christian identity and retrash the militias, the Albuquerque Journal called me up and wanted to know what I thought about the Homeland Security assessment, which I have in my book, Mystery Babylon. And I said, what part of the Second Amendment don't you understand? Japan didn't invade us because Americans were armed. They said there'd be a gun waiting for them behind every blade of grass in America. I just saw something on the internet where the largest army in the world can be found in about 4 states, and that's the hunters.
That's right.
What's that?
That's right. Every hunting season they have a bivouac.
And
Yes, sir.
so that's the reason that we're not totally in a we're not totally a communist country yet, because there's still some people that believe in the Bill of Rights and honor our oath to protect and defend the Constitution.
And one of the ironies of the end of the Cold War is that a whole swath of states in Central Europe, from Bulgaria up to the Baltic states of Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, have done away with their income taxes. They have become very pro-business. They have begun to really prosper. They're not antagonistic to businesses, unlike here in our country, where there's so much regulation, and now with this current president, so much rhetoric directed against businesses that you can understand why businesses leave this country. The highest taxes on business in the world, apparently, from what I've been hearing, and yet they've learned the lesson from suffering under communism there in Central Europe. I'm sorry to say it hasn't, apparently the lesson hadn't gotten through in the old Soviet Union itself, but in any case, the irony is we won that war, and those governments have really picked up on the message, and they're prospering as a result of it. And as you say, we're just continuing to slog deeper into the swamp of socialism, and it's having a severe impact on our economy. But it's not, and I'm convinced of this, it's not being done out of incompetence or ignorance. It's being done on purpose by a Marxist who got elected president who hates this country and has made it pretty clear when we listen to what he has said on those few occasions when he has let his guard down. He thinks we need to be fundamentally transformed, and we know what he means by fundamental transformation because he told Joe the plumber what that means. He thinks that wealth needs to be redistributed, and until I see him writing large checks to the homeless, I'm not.
He has done that. You really think about it, Larry. He's really been honest with us. I mean, he came right out in front and told us he was a psychopolitical Soviet psychopolitical change agent. I mean, he built his whole campaign around change. I just don't think the American people understood what kind of change he was talking about.
No, he talked in vague enough terms, and there was a very few occasions, such as the Joe the Plumber moment, when he was that direct, and you had to kind of connect the dots. And naturally, the Democrat media wasn't going to do that for their Democrat darling. So he was able to waltz into office, as you say, using a change agent term right up in front of your face, hope and change. But people had no preparation. Nobody had connected the dots for them. They didn't even know there were dots out there, mostly because the media wasn't going to tell them that. So, on he went in, and they had been led to believe that Bush was absolutely the worst thing that ever happened. So, hey, anything's got to be better, right?
Of course, Bush, his parting gesture was to give the owners of the Federal Reserve $2 trillion taxpayer dollars. That we had to borrow that money to give it back to the owners of the Federal Reserve, as I understand it.
It's an amazing thing that he would defend the bailout as I had to abandon capitalism in order to save capitalism. I had to use a little bit of socialism in order to save capitalism. That shows to me that the guy was a victim of his education at Yale, where he got his MBA, because that's the kind of nonsense that you'll be taught at a school like that. And if you go there from a ruling class family, which of course he did, his daddy was a Connecticut Yankee, for goodness sakes, then you just assume that, well, yeah, the ruling class rules, and this is the way they rule, and a little collectivism is, well, that's what we're all about, right?
Right. All right. Hang on just a second, Larry.